have here for you. And, thanks for giving us the opportunity to voice our perspectives on the world today. It's appreciated. I'll start greetings to all of you from myself and the Lakota people. We meet on this day, a day 121 years removed from the massacre of 300 children, women, and men by the United States government, backed, of course, by corporate greed and interests, backed by the uberage of that time, by the 1% of the 19th century. Not to diminish all the factors that are involved in this murderous rampage, this physical genocide of the people. This genocide of the people was brought about after the peaceful movement of the Ghost Dance, known as the Ghost Dance movement, could not be deterred or diminished through war talk and promises. The people at the time have seen what treaties and promises have brought them, what Christianity, boarding schools, along with the white man's education, provided. The result certainly was not equality and justice. The result was not near what indigenous societies provide ever so naturally. For this powerful movement of peace, this Ghost Dance movement, this movement to bring about justice and equality, the people were punished dearly. In saying so, the people of the Occupy movement are doing something very courageous, and our hearts go out to you. I represent my family. They give me my voice, my power. We are indigenous. We are Oglala. We come from a place where the 1% mentality has brought to bear 70 to 80% unemployment. 70 to 80% unemployment. And over 51% of the population living in poverty. We understand more than anyone on this continent about sustaining the movement in the belly of the most powerful nation on earth. We have done it for hundreds of years, and we are still at it to this day. We admire your courage, strength, and commitment, and it binds us as true brothers and sisters in the common struggle for justice and human respect and dignity. Let me provide you a quick history lesson, a synopsis, if you will, of what Western civilization and the policies of the 1% have done to us. Through military force and might, taking advantage of the poor and destitute in your own country, by usurping the power of government through corporate influence, America has managed to take away our people's economy, way of life, dispossess us of land, used for sustainability, demoralized our family structure, and left us with poverty, death, and disease. Left us barely alive enough to babysit, quote unquote, their wealth on the surface and below. Until one day, they, the 1%, feel the need to harvest those resources. At that time, we will be forced again to move off the land base into cities or shanty towns. To make matters worse, they told us, use the dollar, not the buffalo. And of course, the buffalo are decimated. There was no choice. Since then, there have been very little dollars, and of course, the 1% have been hoarding what's left of them. Or all of them, I should say. This is ongoing. And I ask, how is this not genocide? Is this way of living the best Western civilization could offer? Sitting Bull understood this. He understood it well. Upon hearing that our relatives, the Dakota, who have had a treaty with the Americans, were imprisoned at a military stockade, what is now called Crow Creek Indian Reservation, located just south of where Pierre, South Dakota is now on the Missouri River. He paid them a visit. Upon hearing this, he paid them a visit. It was told to me that because of this visit and the treatment of our relatives, regardless of the fact that there was a peace treaty, and seeing the harsh treatment given therein to the prisoners of war, the women and children included, that this experience was one of the driving factors in Sitting Bull's unwillingness to never sign a treaty with Americans. It was fruitless. Why go through the process? You're only going to break it and enslave you and take what's left. Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, as well as hundreds of other brave, courageous men of our past in resistance to imperialism and ultimate assimilation, formed a Northern Alliance. People of the North, whose primary living and hunting space was north of the Black Hills and south of what now is Yellowstone River. This alliance was to be the last holdout against American empire. These families, these bands, living in the natural way, knowing no other, formed the brunt of resistance when Custer came calling for his death. These are the people who did not want to sign treaties. They did not want America's economy. But eventually, as all known all too well, the indigenous rarely escape empire, and if they do, it is only a matter of time. The question is, and I'm sure it was on our ancestors' mind, how long can we sustain a life, a family, and protect our children from being chased by military might, designed specifically to fight destructive, unforgiving war? Eventually, hunger and cold came to the people, as it was designed by the United States when it purposely attempted to make extinct the buffalo. When this occurred, nice little pens called reservations, more appropriately prison camps, were ready and waiting. Even then, food was not readily available as promised by in the treaties for the exchange of land. You had to be a good inmate. You had to subject yourself to ultimate rule, to demeaning treatment, or you starved to death. One way to alleviate hunger was to participate in work for a wage. In fact, the military and the agency superintendent, prison warden, made quick work of ensuring that warriors, the protectors, the Akichita of the family in the Lakotaway, were offered jobs as scouts for military activity elsewhere, and made police officers for local control, for obvious reasons. From the time to the present, the Lakota, the hunter-gatherer society, the ultimate and sustainable societies, began to depend on items produced elsewhere and shipped in, paid for by wages. Wages earned by renting themselves out for other people's gain. And of course, empire and citizens can now feel safe, were able to feel safe in their newly acquired territory. Resources will then be extracted, production will rise, profits will skyrocket, armies will be funded, and new frontiers invaded. This wonderful world of Western civilization at its finest. How idiotic is it to believe that the rich made their money honestly, through hard work and determination. I tell you now, for every ounce of gold the 1% possess, there's a pile of bones somewhere. An extinct species, a missing mountain, a dead river, a patch of wasteland, and a people living in fear and despair. You can substitute the currency of your choice. These people who find themselves victims of this ongoing genocide find the ability to exist physically only in the assimilative policy of empire. Let's not forget that the 1% need your fear and taxes to wage war for their profit. They find this easier to do when there is a high disparity in wealth as there is now. Understanding this and finally tiring of conditions back home, some of my uncles and cousins stood up to the U.S. government in 1973 at the site of the massacre of Wounded Knee. They were told by our elders and spiritual leaders that it was important to take a stand there, even though it was an valley surrounding the mass grave of the 300 children, women, and men who were murdered in 1890 by the U.S. military. My relatives stood their ground against overwhelming military strength, the bitter cold, and hunger for 71 days. Some of your relatives came to the assistance of our people by flying in supplies during the siege by the U.S. government. So we have a long relationship. We have relationships with your movement. It is our movement too. Because truthfully, what indigenous person, what Lakota doesn't understand fully the implications of excess accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few, or the effect of the disparity of income and the dismantling of true democracy and representative government. When the 1% takes more than it needs, our people back home are most vulnerable, and they suffer first. Our people are literally dying in Indian health service facilities because it is underfunded by 50%, and there's no money to treat them adequately, despite international agreements and treaties. We are the first to feel the joblessness and lack of income that results from others taking far more than they will ever need. It is our children who are not being educated so that the wealthy can gorge themselves upon war profits and stock profits and only drive up the cost of food and medicine and produce nothing in return. With 70 to 80